Hola, buenas, ¿cómo están? Hope everybody's doing well today. We're coming to you guys from the beautiful Jardín del Turia today. And today we're going to be discussing a topic or a question that we've been getting more than any other when we talk to friends and family back in the United States. Everybody wants to know, how long are you guys going to live in Spain? Or when are you guys coming back to the US?
Well, we are going to answer that question and let you guys know the factors we considered when making this decision. Listos?
Vamonos. Now, there are several factors we considered when thinking about what would make us go back to live in the United States. And the main one would be family needs and dependency. If either one of us had a family member who got grievously ill or sick, of course that would weigh heavily on our decision to move back to the US. But outside of that scenario, we're going to be discussing the other main factors that we would consider in making our decision whether we should or would go back to the United States. Now, on the top of the list would be our physical and mental health. Now, we have 3 children, one attending university and 2 little ones in elementary school. Now, as every parent knows, at one point or another, you're going to end up at the doctor's office with your children or for yourself, or God forbid, in the hospital, right? Now, when we were living in the United States, it was a constant lingering fear in the back of my mind that if one of our children got sick or needed medical attention, what would that financial cost look like, or the financial setback, right? What would it look like? Because anytime you seek medical attention in the United States, it's going to cost you some money out of pocket. Whether you have good insurance or not, you're going to pay something. Now, it's no secret that the U.S. healthcare system is not the best, despite what they proclaim in the United States. It consistently ranks last or near last when compared to other high-income countries. It has high rates of medical errors, high maternal mortality rates, and all this despite being the most expensive healthcare system in the world. It is a for-profit system that prioritizes a healthy bottom line over good outcomes or quality of care for the patients. Now, I have some first-hand knowledge of this. I worked in the dental field for 20 years. I worked in public health, I worked in private practice, and I worked in corporate dentistry as well. When I worked in corporate dentistry, we had weekly production meetings. Our weekly production meetings were a conference call with all the dental providers within our region and the regional operations director. And every meeting was the same. We focused on and analyzed how much money each one of us was individually producing for the company on a weekly basis based on the treatments that we were recommending for our patients. And they would rank us. They would rank each individual provider based on how much you were producing for the company on a weekly basis. And so if you were on the top half of the ranking, you had no need to worry. You were commended and there was no questions asked. But if you were on the bottom half of the list, the questions would inevitably come. Why are you not producing more for the company? Why are your patients not accepting these treatments? And, they never asked, do your patients need said treatments? How are your patients doing? It was all focused on how much money we're producing every week or every month for the company. And they would incentivize us to recommend more treatments by offering us bonuses, production bonuses. If we reached a certain threshold every month, any dollar amount above that threshold, we would get 30% of. So let's just say that dollar amount was $50,000. And so once we reached a production number of $50,000 a month, anything above that, we would get 30% of. So if I produced $100,000, I would get 30% of $50,000 plus my salary. And so there were some pretty high performers in the company. There were some people that would bonus $10,000, $15,000 a month by producing high amounts of income for the company. And, personally, I was kind of middle tier throughout my career within the corporate dentistry. There were some months where I did really well, and there were some months where I didn't do well as far as my production numbers went. And in those months where I didn't do well, my regional directors would always call me and ask me, what's going on? Why are your production numbers suffering? Why are your patients not accepting these treatments? And my response was always the same, because they don't need the treatments. Some months I would get patients who were really sick, had bad oral health care, and they needed, extensive cleanings or treatments above and beyond, locally delivered antibiotics, things of that nature, adjunct care on top of the care that we were giving them in order for them to get healthier. And so all these different treatments obviously would cost more money. And so in those months, my production numbers looked well. But on months where say I had a month where I had a lot of healthy patients that just needed preventative care, there was no need for me to recommend treatment that was above and beyond what they needed. And so my production numbers would suffer, but my patients were doing fine because I had healthy patients. But that was never accepted, or it wasn't commended. If I had healthy patients that would come in the office, my regional directors would never call and be like, hey, we're glad your patients are doing well. Thank you for educating them on their oral health care. That never happened. It was always about how much money are you bringing into the company and what treatments can you recommend for your patients. That was a constant topic as well. Are your patients getting X treatment? Are they getting Y treatment? Are they getting Z treatment? Are you offering it to them? And to me, it was very easy to see that the well-being of the patient was not being focused on. It was more on how much money can the patient give us is really what it was. And we even had in-house financing. If a patient couldn't afford a treatment, say a patient actually needed a treatment, and they couldn't afford it, we'd offer in-house financing. And there were some providers that did really, really well. And, these high performers never got questioned by the company, despite their numbers being very inflated. They would be producing $100,000 a month for the company. Nobody bothered to look at their charts or to assess whether the patient actually had need for all the treatments they were receiving. And sometimes I would see the patients of these high performers when, say, they went on vacation or say they went off to a different company, and I would take over their patients and I would review these charts. I would look at the treatments that they had received prior to me seeing them. And a lot of times they didn't need these treatments. They had received treatment that they paid thousands of dollars for when there was no medical necessity for it. And so a lot of providers did take advantage of this because patients trust that the person standing next to them in the white coat is recommending treatments that they actually need, not treatments that are going to affect or benefit the provider instead of the patient. Now, my experience is just a small example, but that is the root of the problem. It's a for-profit healthcare system. I did some digging as to why the United States doesn't have universal healthcare. And, it goes back to post-World War II when the US was trying to implement universal healthcare based on the UK's NHS, the National Health Services. And there was a strong campaign by the American Medical Association, believe it or not, and other industries to associate universal healthcare with socialism. And they promoted private healthcare with individualism and the American way. And I wish I was making this up. I really do, but that's one of the reasons why the US doesn't have universal health care, and it's ridiculous. And it's a talking point that gets brought up every so often in American politics. Every 8 years or so, there'll be a politician that starts to promote the idea of universal health care. And right away, an opponent will come up and say, that's socialism, and it gets shut down. Because in the US, socialism is still, villainized. It's like the boogeyman. You can't use that word. Socialism is always associated to communism, and so that gets shut down right away. And it's a shame because healthcare is the one thing that everyone is going to need eventually. Every single one of us at some point or another is going to need healthcare. And the number one reason for bankruptcy in the United States is medical debt. The number one reason. It's a running joke back in the US that if you get hit by a car, you better walk it off or get yourself a good lawyer because it's going to cost you. I can't count how many social media posts we see that are GoFundMe pages for medical expenses from people that we know or someone that we know, a friend of a friend of a friend. But we see so many GoFundMe pages back home.
It's either for an accident or, in my case, one of my clients' daughters just got diagnosed with leukemia, and she makes really good money, but she couldn't afford all of the bills that were associated with her daughter's leukemia. She's trying to keep her daughter alive.
And so on top of the mental anguish of her daughter suffering, now she has to deal with, how am I going to pay for all this? Because she's obviously she's not going to work, so she's probably not getting paid. And it's absolutely ridiculous. But when we were in the United States, we just kind of accepted it as the norm. Like, oh yeah, well, we have health insurance. We know it's not going to pay for everything. So you find other ways. Like I said, we had a medical savings account, and then you get accident insurance. There are other ways to kind of cover the gaps that will come up because medical expenses are, well, they're skyrocketing. They're so expensive. And, I recently befriended a doctor here, a medical doctor here in Valencia, and we were discussing the differences between healthcare system in the U.S. and the healthcare system here. And of course, Spain's healthcare system is not perfect. They do have universal healthcare here in Spain, and usually at the point of delivery of medical care, the patients pay nothing, whether you're a Spanish citizen or a resident. But he admitted that it's not perfect, right? He did say that sometimes patients do have to wait a certain amount of time for non-emergency medical care, and that even he feels the stress of seeing too many patients, right? Of being overworked sometimes. One thing he told me that was very reassuring and very comforting was, no matter, who you are here in Spain, if your child were to get, let's say, a life-threatening disease, they're going to receive the best healthcare we have to offer without you having to lose your home or go into financial ruin. And I mean, that's a comforting thought that most Americans are never going to feel or experience.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't exist over there. It just doesn't exist, and it's a shame. Because we do have some forms of socialism back home, like our fire and police departments are socialized, right? You call the firefighters, they come to your house whether you're the poorest of the poor, the richest of the rich, richest of the rich. They're going to come put out the fire in your house, and they're not going to give you a bill for it. It's paid through our tax dollars. Right. Just like the medical system is here. People pay through it through Social Security contributions and their tax dollars. And they have free access to healthcare. And that's the way it should be. The fact that people are so afraid of the term socialism back home, and it's used as a weapon to keep people paying into this, incredibly expensive medical system that is putting people into financial ruin and making people go bankrupt just to try to keep themselves healthy or alive. I mean, it's really a shame. And you don't realize it, or you don't really consider it too much until you get out. Once you're out, you're like, the veil is,
been paying into.
Yeah, the veil is kind of pulled back from your eyes, and you're just kind of like, what? What have we been doing? And it's a shame. And like I say, most Americans, when you're in there and when you're living in there and you're on the hamster wheel just running, trying to stay alive and feed your family and pay your bills, you don't even have time to consider it.
And as far as mental health aspect of all of this goes, I feel here in Spain that the mental health is a lot better. And here's why. We are outside in the Turia Park. If we could pan around this park, there are so many people walking, biking, just sitting in benches. I see a couple of people across from us sitting in benches and just like basking in the sun. So people are outside. They don't want to be inside. And, also to add into that, all the parks here have exercise areas. So you'll see, 70, 80-year-olds on there doing exercise. They have the elliptical.
Exercise equipment,
yeah, exercise equipment. And just all different kinds of things like to lift. And it's just body weight or just, what is
like little cardio
machines and all these little things outside. So if you don't have the means to have a gym membership, you can go to the park, and they have so many walking trails, so many biking trails, and it makes it so much easier to be outside.
Yeah, no, it's really impressive, and it's one of the things that we noticed when we first came, how everybody interacts constantly. Like back home, if you look at a stranger in the eye and say hello, people might think you're weird,
Why are you telling me hello?
Yeah, and here it's rude if you don't, almost. It's very common. You go into any place of business, the gym, the bakery, and there's people inside. You walk in, you say, hola, buenas, ¿cómo están? And everybody will greet you. And as you leave, you say, hasta luego. And everybody says, hasta luego. And it's common. It's just common, and it's expected almost. And back home, if I walked into any place of business and you kind of told everybody hello, people would kind of be like, who's this guy, And you see everybody out and walking. You see 80 and 90-year-olds in their walkers, moving slowly, but they're outside and they're interacting with the young kids. Every time we take our girls out and they're at the park and an older person walks by, they're always like, hola chiquitas, ¿cómo están? Hola guapas, and it makes the girls feel good, and they interact with the older person, which makes them feel good. So all these small interactions really just make you feel good, right? They boost your emotion, and It connects you. It connects you to all these people that you're with. These small little actions are appreciated every day. And by the time you have all these small interactions and you go back home, then you're fulfilled. You feel like, man, you just
I
feel
talked to
so
this person,
good.
I talked to that person.
Yeah.
I know I'll go to yoga class and I'll come back and I'm like, oh, hey, I stopped at this and I was talking to so-and-so and I was talking here. And it's really great to know like we can form connections with people and it's easily done here.
Yeah.
Rather back home, like he said, people look at you and kind of like, why are you saying hi to me? Like, it's kind of we didn't understand. And I probably think that people thought we were rude, right? Because we wouldn't say anything because we're just so used to that. And it's just one of those things.
And you can see how it boosts your mental health because we're communal people. Humans are communal, right? We mimic each other and we want to be accepted. Yeah, and so all these factors that we discuss right now, or all these things that we've noticed, they contribute to a positive mental health here.
Yeah.
And like she said, if you look behind us, you'll see people behind us, and if we could pan around, there's older people doing exercise and yoga and stretching, and it's par for the course everywhere you go. Any park, you'll bump into a senior dance class or a senior yoga class, but everybody's constantly out and everybody's constantly interacting. And it's, the mental health here, I don't know the exact rates, but I know that in the US, they're continually growing. And it's easy to see why. There's a lot more isolation back home. You're isolated in your car, you get to your house and you stay inside. Here, everybody's out, especially when the sun's out. If the sun is outside,
better run.
You better make a reservation at an outdoor dining spot because the tables are going to be full. Yeah. If the sun's out, everybody's out. Yeah. Everyone.
Sun's out, fun's out.
Yeah, for sure. And it's amazing because we feel better. There's a lot less stress here for us personally, and we can see, and we're starting to mimic a lot more of the Spanish lifestyle because that's why we came here. Yeah. We don't want to be having an American lifestyle living in Spain. That makes no sense. Why would we even move, right?
Right.
And so, it's a big contributor to our positive mental health here. Yeah. And the second biggest factor we've considered, access to quality education, right? Back home, we had our girls in a private religious school, not because we're particularly religious, but because it was a dual language school. In the public schooling system back in the United States, they don't start teaching second languages until the kids are in middle school. So children have to be about the age of 11 or 12 to start learning a second language back home, which makes no sense because we all know that the younger the child is, the faster they're going to pick up a second language. Mm-hmm. And so that's the reason we put them in the particular school they were in back in the U.S. It was a dual language school. They started learning Spanish and English from the day we put them in there. And, it cost a pretty penny. For the time the girls were in school, we paid an average of about $1,300 for both of them for a couple of years till we moved here to Spain. And here in Spain, we have them in a very similar school. It's a religious school as well. They teach 3 languages, and even in the public schooling system here in Spain, they teach 3 languages from the get-go. As soon as kids go into school, they teach Castellano, which is Spanish, Valenciano, and English, right, at different percentages each in the public school system and in the school system where we have our girls. And the public school system here in Spain is free. The school where we have our girls, the religious school, costs us 350 euros a month for both of them, which is about $375. So it's a quarter of what we were paying back home, and it's an amazing school. They take them on field trips constantly. They're going out to theaters. They take them to farms to see how food and crops are grown. Yeah. They're constantly out, and they play for about 2 hours a day in school. And they also have weekly reading sessions with the children in higher grades. So the older children get to engage with the younger children, and the younger children get to engage with the older children and practicing their reading skills. Yeah. And even the cost of extracurricular activities here is a fraction of what we paid back home. Yeah. Here we signed our girls up for weekly swim classes. For a 10-month period, we paid $80 per child. $80 pays for them going to swim class once a week for 10 months. You're never going to find that back home.
80s was for one class.
Yeah,
for an hour class.
Yeah, $80 for an hour class back home every time. They go to music class once a week, and it's 50 euros for both of them to go once a week to music class. They go to dance class for 25 euros each once a week.
Yeah.
I mean, these are prices that you're never going to encounter back home. Never.
Yeah.
And so the cost of education is a lot less. The cost of extracurricular activities is a lot less expensive. And the quality is a lot better.
And we're going kind of piggybacking off your quality is the food. Our kids are having calamari and all these things from the market. Like,
Yeah.
and it's just so great.
Every day I ask the girls, what did you eat in school today? And they're like, oh, but we had lentils, or we had calamari, and we had, paella.
Yeah.
And for dessert, we had oranges and apples. And it's just like, man, that is so amazing. Because back home, yeah, everything comes out of a package, and they warm it up for you, and they feed you, and there you go. And
Yeah.
like she said, when we were young, we loved it. We loved the little frozen pizza that we would get. But now you think
Mystery
back,
meat.
yeah, you realize it. Yeah, it was completely processed and probably terrible for us. But that's the way it was. And so, yeah, it's a big difference. And it's easily noticeable within the school system. The differences. And we're in a better situation here. There's no better way to put it. As far as the education system here is better. And who's kidding who? If you look at rankings as far as the U.S. education system, constantly falling behind. The math ranking, the U.S. is falling behind. The literacy rates, the U.S. falls behind amongst other developed countries. And I mean, you make a decision, right? You see what's best for your family. And I mean, that's another big consideration for us is the education. And then when you consider higher education in the U.S., you better be ready to saddle yourself with $100,000 in debt just to get in the door. That's, yeah. I mean, one of the biggest problems in the United States right now is overwhelming rise in higher education debt. Everybody's saddled with it, and it's not going away. And it's a shame because people get saddled with it for the rest of their lives. Because of interest rates, they might never pay it off. There's people who are in their 50s and 60s who still have college debt. And just like medical expenses back home, the higher education costs are ridiculous. And when you're young and you're 18 and you've been conditioned to believe that higher education is the only way to move up the socioeconomic ladder, yeah. You think, well, that's the logical next step. Let me take out a loan and go to school. And then when you consider that not everybody graduates, I don't know what the graduation rates are for public universities now, but I know they're not stellar, they're not great. I think the last I saw might be a 30% failure rate. These kids are still walking around with that debt, and now they're not making the money that they thought they were going to make.
To pay off that debt.
I mean, it's a shame. And here in Spain, you go to a public university, it costs a fraction of what we would pay in the United States. I'm not going to say back home because it's not our home anymore. I use the term, when I say back home, it's kind of like saying your parents' house, right? You leave your parents' house, you still call it back home for a while until you've been gone for long enough that it's not really your home anymore. And so I know people have commented, like, why do you always say back home? It's because of that,
Yeah.
But this is our home now.
So going into the third factor, I would want to kind of introduce this one because everybody always asks me this question, would you go back? And this is probably the main one, is the cost of living. The cost of living here is about 40% cheaper than it is to live in the U.S. And when I talk to people about our groceries, we're buying organic, going to the markets, buying fresh produce once a week, just kind of like what we did back in the U.S. And so we, go and buy a week's worth of produce, and it's just way cheaper. We just keep looking at our ticket. We're like, are you sure they charged us the right amount? Back in the U.S., I did a lot of the grocery shopping, but I was in the organic, clean, just kick. And so I would go to these organic stores and go to these clean stores, and we were looking at $250 to $300 a week in groceries. Here we spend, what, $120?
Yeah, maybe $100 a week.
Maybe $100, and $120 is like $20 because we overindulged on some stuff a week. So going off of the groceries, it's the education that we're paying less on, the cost of living as far as housing, energy costs.
Yeah, the cost of living is definitely less expensive. And like you said, kind of across the board, groceries, energy costs, dining out is less expensive as well. Now, home prices are somewhat on par with back in the United States, depending, of course, on where you live. I'm not going to say home prices here would be the same as they would be in Los Angeles, California. Obviously not. But based on what they are, say in like San Antonio, Texas, they might be very similar. But one thing I know for sure is that home prices keep on going up in the United States. From when we bought our home in 2020 to when we sold it in 2024, our home value doubled, practically doubled. So I know home prices are just skyrocketing. And now I can imagine it's very difficult for people to buy a home in the United States right now. Even if you make a good income, you could be making over $100,000 in the United States, which back then was kind of a standard. If you made six figures, you were like, wow, I'm doing well for myself. Yeah. I doubt even making six figures that you can get a mortgage or have the 20% down to put down on a home and, you know, get a mortgage for the remaining 80%, because home prices have just skyrocketed so much. Also, the last factor, and not to give it any less importance, is safety. And we went into safety in one of our previous videos, and so I'm not going to get into the weeds of it too much, but Spain is a lot safer than the United States. As the highest type of crime here is property crime. In the United States is violent crime. Here, I was researching some recent statistics. Homicide rates are about 0.68% per 100,000. The U.S. is 7 times that. And we all know the U.S. has a problem with gun violence. And so I'm not
violence in general.
Violence in general. There's a mental health crisis back in the United States as well, which obviously I imagine would contribute to it in some way, shape, or form. So safety, cost of living, access to good quality education, and access to good quality healthcare that isn't going to put you in financial ruin. Yeah. Those 4 things are really going to keep us here in Spain. Yeah. We have no desire or are in no rush to go back to the U.S. right now. We're happy to be where we are. And to be quite honest, growing up, we probably never even considered that we would be here in this position. We're living a dream, and when we made the decision to leave, which wasn't an easy decision, you know, I think it's one of the best decisions we ever made. And like I said, it wasn't easy, because when we first got here, we didn't know a single person, you know, so we're kind of swam in this sea of uncertainty for a while as we established new friend groups. But the process of from when we got here to where we are now, as scary as it was for ourselves and for our children didn't know anybody either. Yeah. So they themselves had to go through the process and come out of their shells and meet new people, and it forces growth. We're on this personal growth journey, and I don't know if we could give anybody advice, it would be, if you have the means to leave your home country and go somewhere else, do it, because it gives you a whole new perspective on life, and it makes you appreciate where you come from. Because now that we're here, we do appreciate where we came from. We appreciate the opportunities that land gave us. But it also gives us an appreciation for where we are. Yeah. Because we notice that some things are better here.
And so, just kind of tying it all in together, we're just wanting to encourage people to dream. I always tell people that message me, dream big. We want to inspire you to think outside of the box, to do the thing that you want to do. If you're going to say, I want to go and live in Italy for 3 months to see how it is, go live in Italy for 3 months if you have the means, you know. Don't wait for your dreams to happen until retirement. And I know we're going to keep stressing that, but I just feel it's just a big factor in our videos, is to inspire people to move forward with your dreams.
You'll never regret it. All the expats, we've met several expat families here, none of them regret moving outside of the United States. Not one. We have yet to find one that says it was a mistake leaving the U.S.
Yeah.
Because you really gain a new perspective. And like I say, you learn to appreciate things in a different way. And so, if you can, we would highly encourage you to do it.
Yeah.
And as always, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And please, share your insights with us. Share your stories in the comments section. Yeah. We love to read them. All of the comments, good or bad, it doesn't matter. We love everybody.
We're here to encourage inspiration, encourage growth, encourage adventure. So yeah, just keep following us, and we'll see you guys in the next film.
All right. Adios. Hasta luego.